love your moniker, which is helping authors get back to writing. Kind of
Yeah.
explain where that comes from and why you chose to go that route.
So that's everything that I do is getting authors back to writing, because as an author, that's one of the hardest things for me to do, and one of the things that I have struggled with. It started with a need to know how to market, and then I spent all my time marketing, and I realized I wasn't writing. So, I found Tim Grahl, and I found this amazing methodology in his connection system. And so I got certified through him, and then I had the marketing down to where it just took a couple hours a month. Um, and then I realized I wanted to work on story. So I started studying story through StoryGrid and got my certification there as an editor. And so basically I have all these qualifications, but the point is getting authors back to writing. I don't want you to have to spend most of your time marketing. One of the things that I see all the time is authors are saying, if you could have one thing, what is it? An 8th day in the week so that I could market my book.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to happen. But we do have this amazing system that Tim created. And he just took stuff that people were already doing and put it together and shows you the connections. That's why it's called the connection system. Everything's connected, your email list, your website, your social media, and everything that you do just to get your name out there, which we call outreach. All of it is connected. And if you're doing it properly, you really only need a couple hours a month to maintain and sell your book.
Yeah, I've seen that system. That's pretty awesome. I like that. I like that idea. It's great in theory, but you have to set it up and then execute it, right?
And setting it up does take time. That's the time-consuming thing, that's kind of the whole point. Where when I was trying to figure out, I was doing one-to-one coaching, and I was doing all this stuff to help authors, and you can't pay me enough to keep me away from writing my book. So I started looking into group stuff, and that's where these classes came from that I'm just starting them. So if you sign up now, you get a discount, because I'm new to doing group things, but I needed something where I got enough monetary compensation for it to be worth it, and you didn't have to pay out the nose, so that's where I created the Author Platform Bootcamp, which is a 12-week course where we get everything set up. And that's really, once you're done, then you just have to spend, an hour or two maintaining it.
I'm curious about your philosophy about the writing process in itself. Do you feel like it is like riding a bike? It's just a muscle memory that you have to keep, exercising, and if you don't use it for a while, it's easy to get back into it. Or do you feel like there is a methodology or a discipline that you have to have in order to maintain, the idea that you can, keep writing?
I do think it's a discipline, because this is kind of complicated, because depending on why you stopped riding the bike is going to affect when you get back on it. So if you had a terrible accident, you're scared to get on the bike, and you have to overcome that fear. Right. And what a lot of authors don't realize is that they're actually scared of writing. Every author that I've ever met, and I've heard several of them say, "Oh no, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anything." Blah. But no, it's fear. Your fear of success, your fear of failure, your fear of sharing your work, your fear of knowing what you think. There's all of these different fears associated with writing. And if you stop, you get into this comfort zone of I'm safe, and I'm not sharing anything, so it's fine. And as soon as you start writing again, and it's also addictive, it's kind of like an adrenaline junkie experience. That's what happened to me when I was writing my last book, which is part of why I was able to write it so fast, because all I wanted to do was write this book. I was like, I'm doing it, I'm getting there, but starting was so difficult, because I stopped to study marketing, I stopped to study story, and now I'm a certified StoryGrid editor. I have to know my shit. So then there was this added fear of I'm an expert, and somebody's going to read this and they're going to be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But just get the first draft done. Just jump in and start doing it. And then it does come back. But story is also something that's learned. It's learned in everything that we do and how we teach our children and how we grow up. And we're constantly bombarded by story in video games, TVs and books, and even short form fiction. It's everywhere. Stories are everywhere, and we're constantly, you need to actively learn it if you're an author, which is what StoryGrid did for me is it helped me now when I can still like kind of turn it off and enjoy the book or the movie. But afterwards, I can go back and say, oh, yeah, they did this, this, and this, and that's why I'm satisfied at the end. Or this was missing, and that's why I'm not satisfied at the end.
Yeah, and I come from a screenplay background, so and a movie background, so 3-act structure is like king for me, and that you learn that from every screenwriting book you could possibly pick up, and it all talks about how there's certain points that certain things happen, and you have to hit it by this amount of pages or this idea, and the whole you can still be original within that framework, but the idea that because it works, we're so, our brains are so trained to expect that even when it subverts it or changes it, even if you're telling a non-linear story, there's still points in which you hit those marks. And do you find that fiction is kind of the same way? Is StoryGrid kind of in that same vein?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that Sean Coyne did for StoryGrid comes from all of these different sources of story that already existed. And the reason all of these sources are basically saying the same thing and putting it in different ways. I like StoryGrid methodology because of the way that he put it together, but it's the same. Like studying screenwriting is, if you've studied screenwriting, you can write a novel. Like, so because once you know that format, and everybody's always like, oh, formula, it's boring, blah, blah, blah. No, once you know the format, you can innovate. And that's where the magic happens. That's what Anne Rice did with Interview with a Vampire. She innovated the horror story that was a vampire story. And it's huge. And she's made lots of money from it. Every time there's a vampire, boom, she makes more money. There's a reason for that. So know what you're talking about, know your structure, and then you can innovate and have fun and really make magic happen.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a great pointing out, because when you take screenwriting classes, the one that always gets brought up is Tarantino, because he doesn't write linearly. Everything is but it's all connected. And if you watch carefully a Tarantino film, you'll still see that he hits the points that he's supposed to hit at the certain times he's supposed to hit them, because that's storytelling. That's just the way it works, right? And it's very similar. I mean, even though she subverted the whole vampire genre, she was able to still hit those points, and you know that because they made a movie out of it, and they made it pretty easily.
So that's what I love about story, because once you know that format, you can see it in different things, but you can see where people innovated and where they made these really key pivots and changes that just, it blows your mind, as the viewer or the reader. So that's what we're striving for. But know your structure so that you can do that.
Do you believe that there's still innovations that we haven't seen? Or do you think every story's been told?
There is that whole, like, pretty much every story has been told, but what I'm seeing a lot is different blendings of stories. Like, you see the person who thinks that they have a perfect little unicorn story that doesn't fit in any genre. It fits in a genre. It does. But like romantic suspense was born when someone took a love story and a thriller and then brought them together, and this is a huge genre now. So that's what I'm working on now, is romantic suspense. So, but that's where that came from. But anyway, anytime that people take two things and mix them together like that in a way that works, like this, again, you have to know both to make it work. But that's where we're seeing some really cool changes. And I love what's happening in sci-fi, with different things are becoming bigger, I guess. I'm not a huge sci-fi reader, so V is my sci-fi person, but whenever she comes out and talks to me about a new book, sometimes it's like, whoa, like, where did that come from? That's an excellent idea. And so I think there are ways to innovate, and the story itself, the core maybe has been told before, but the way that you tell it as the individual that's where the magic is and where the uniqueness is.
You brought up V.S. Holmes in that respect. Uh, she's taking she's doing things within the LGBTQ community that, and I'm wondering, as we evolve as humans and become, more aware of other things like transgender and things like that, things that we were well aware of a long time ago, but they were taboo or they weren't talked about. Do you feel like that's where story is going to grow? Is that evolution of who we are?
I think that that's definitely a huge direction, and things that need to happen, stories that need to be told. That's one of the reasons that I love her fantasy books, is because she took that step with Madness and Gods, and now her upcoming book, Blood and Mercy. I get behind the scenes. So, but she did a lot with LGBTQ plus characters that we don't see a whole lot of. And this is a huge audience that is underserved. So if that's something that you feel you can tackle, and if you don't have personal knowledge, sensitivity readers are a great way to go. They can help you a lot and make sure that you're not doing anything accidentally offensive, because you're trying to serve the reader, not offend the reader. I know a lot of people, it's just another form of editing. It doesn't have to be a thing.
What do you think is the best way to get started writing? What do you usually recommend for people to just get started?
To get back on the bike, if you've already been a writer, or this is kind of interesting. Okay, so I'm doing, I mentioned the classes earlier. I'm doing one for writers, and I have 3 people who have never written a full book before. And I'm kind of throwing them in, and I'm going to see how they do. One of them's my mother, and one of them's my husband. So I'm just kind of tossing them in there, and I'm going to see how they do. But yeah, I'm really curious. So ask me again in 3 months. To get back, like for me, getting back on the bike, I had a family tragedy that just, it decimated like our entire family. It was really bad. And I couldn't write. It was like I had this mental block that was just, it was unsurmountable. I couldn't get around it, because I couldn't deal with these emotions that were over here. So I couldn't focus on what I needed to focus on to write the story over here. And what I did was I actually went to a woman named Kelly Morgan. Her website is creativelife.com. But what she does is she does this improv writing class, and she gives you prompts, but you don't have to use them. And you just write for different periods of time, and then you share it. So you have that immediate feedback loop. It eliminates the fear of sharing your work, because you're not hoarding it away and saving it and not letting anybody see it. You write it and you share it right then. And if you're new, she makes you go first. So there's no anticipation. But doing that class and doing the improv writing, I ended up writing about the family tragedy, and it was difficult to share with the group, but it was so necessary. And I was able to unblock, get things flowing. And then I was able to write this book in February in an insanely short period of time. So I think just getting in there, finding whatever it is, whether it's improv writing or free writing, like in Natalie Goldblum or Goldberg. Oh my gosh, I can't remember her name. Anyway, writing down the bones.
That's Goldberg.
Goldberg, yes. She talks about writing, free writing, and I used to do that a lot, but it didn't work in this case. I needed that extra step of writing and sharing. And that also helps with fear. Like if you're constantly every week going to a class, writing something and sharing it immediately, you get over the fear of sharing your work. So, that's something to be considered as well.
It's funny too, because I read those books a long time ago. I Saved the Cat and Writing Down the Bones, and I always thought, this is horse shit. And it's so funny how your perspective changes, right? And and so for all the young ones out there who are watching this, or who pick up these books and go, this is horse shit, trust me, in 10 or 15 years, you won't think it's horse shit anymore.
Save yourself some time. Get the work in now. Yeah.
What is a book coach? Can you explain that?
So the reason I decided that I was a book coach was it was a marketing thing on my end where I was trying to figure out, I know marketing, I
Mhm.
know editing, I know story, I know publishing. What encompasses all of that? Because if somebody says, what do you do? And I say, I'm a book launch coach, I'm a story grid editor, I've published books, I know the back end of Amazon, and I know all these other platforms, they're going to be like,
Well, yeah.
so you have to come up with something that, so I say I'm a book coach, and then they say, oh, what is that? And I say, well, depending on where you are in your writing process and your publishing process, I can help you. And then they'll say, oh, well, I'm stuck with this. And I can say, I have the answer for that. So it just it was a way to boil it down so that people understood, I have to do with publishing and books, and I can help you. And it gets us to the point where it's their problem, because that's what I'm here to solve, your problem.
So it's just based on whatever point you are at that you take them on.
Yep. I really like, because like I said, I was doing one-to-one coaching, and I can't. I love people. I love working one-to-one, but you can't pay me enough to get me away from my books. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm going into these classes. And I'll give anybody 30 minutes. If you have a question and you need help, just sign up on my website and I will try to solve your problem in 30 minutes. But I'm just not doing, unless you're willing to pay an insane amount of money, I'm not doing one-to-one coaching anymore.
So let's talk about your classes. Let's talk about how you came up with the concept and what it entails. So tell everybody a little bit, give everybody a little sneak preview of what they can expect if they were to sign up for this, and how many people are you involving in each class, and where it begins.
So class sizes max out at 10 because I want it to be intimate, and I want there to be that kind of group think, mastermind kind of quality to it. It's really important to me, because I think building a creative community is one of the best things that I have ever done for myself, for my writing. So that's kind of the goal. So the writing classes are focused on book blueprinting, which is like outlining, but it's a little bit more intense. I tried to outline a book. I read this book. It was like write your book in 90 days or something. And she talks about outlining, and I did it, and I hated it, and I ended up getting rid of the book because I couldn't do it. I hated outlines. I was like, oh, I'm a pantser. No, I was not a pantser. Although I did like loose outlines a lot to kind of, so I knew where I was going. But even that, you end up rewriting a lot. You end up making just kind of wasted words.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like that. I don't like wasted words. I don't like massive rewrites. I needed something that avoided that. And everyone was over here, in like 20 books to 50K talking about rapid release, and I'm writing a book a week and I'm releasing it. And I'm like, but how do you do that without sacrificing quality?
Yeah.
Because craft is really important to me. It's the reason I'm writing the book. Yes, I would like to make enough money that I don't have to do anything else, that this can be my main source of income. But if I'm not telling a good story, I'm not serving anybody. It's a waste of time. And, I'm getting injuries in my wrists and my hands, and for what, So quality is really important to me. And I was talking about this with my fellow book launch coach and story grid editor, Marius Wennison. He was like, hey, I did this thing to write a thesis in a weekend. Let's try it on fiction. And I was like, okay. All right. I'm intrigued. So he kind of walked me through the process, and what I came out with, between what he had done and everything that I had studied leading up to this, is a course where someone can plan their novel so they can write it faster than they've written before. So for me, the most I had ever written was 17,000 words in 7 days. During this process, I was just shy of 25,000 words in 5 days.
Wow.
So because I'm blueprinting, I'm making all of those creative decisions before I sit down to write, which limits the number of creative decisions I make, which limits my fatigue. So that's the idea, is I'm going to take you through all the way through all of this planning, and it takes 12 weeks. I'm not sure, because I'm just starting the first class now. So I'm not sure if it's going to stay 12 weeks or if it's going to end up, if I'm going to be able to condense it or not. I don't want to condense it too much. I want it to be as long as it needs to be, for everyone to get through it and feel satisfied. Because I don't want anyone feeling like they're not getting their money's worth, or like they can't write their book when this is over. I need them to be able to do that. So right now it's 12 weeks, and we'll see if it stays that way. But also, I know that as I was going through this process, it was really hard not to write. I was like, I'm in this. I'm excited. I'm excited about this project. I want to write, which is probably another reason that once I started, I couldn't stop. Yeah, I literally, like, my marriage was affected positively and then negatively. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that class is, and I do have 3 people who have never written a book before. My mom, who is the reason I write, because when I was a kid, she used to write children's books all the time and she'd read them to me. But she's never like finished a book. So I was like, Mom, do this class. So I grabbed her, and I grabbed my husband, who has been talking about this trilogy that he wants to write forever, since we were in high school, actually. So I want to see how they do.
Plus, it will save your marriage a little bit, right? Because they'll be in the class.
Yeah, well, he was like, all right, I'm writing these 3 books, but I'm not writing anymore. And I'm like, all right, you're going to get the bug. So yeah, that's that class. And then the other one is Author Platform Bootcamp, where I will take you through week by week, and we will set up your author platform from website to everything. I'll show you how it's connected. I will get your emails set up, your automation set up. So all you have to do is get people onto your list, and then so all of that, I get all of that going for you. And that's also a 12-week course. I don't know if it's going to need to be a 12-week course, but again, I've never done this group thing before. So it's kind of like trial and error until I get that sorted out. But I like 12 weeks because what I would like to do is not only have you have your platform set, but I would like you to have connections to influencers before the class is over. Because that's the hardest part of the connection system, is making connections with influencers and getting that ball rolling.
Yeah, for sure. So, and you're starting the next round in August, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I've never done the platform bootcamp as a group, so that'll be the first one. So it'll be less expensive than it will be eventually.
Which is a smart time to start both classes because, well, if I'm doing my math right in my head, if you're doing the boot camp one in August, where you start writing with people, then the first chance they get to write would be NaNoWriMo, right? Was that by design?
Yeah, a little bit. It's partly my publishing schedule, because that's okay. So you can't pay me to keep me away from my book. While I'm doing this, while I'm teaching you, I'm blueprinting my next book. So that was on purpose.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wrote 71,000 words in 17 days. So, but like, I don't want anybody to think that I'm selling you this 71,000 words in 17 days. I was challenging myself. And because I was like, it's now or never. I'm giving up on writing altogether, or I'm going to write this book. But I mean, I literally went from not writing. I hadn't written in a year. So.
Yeah, I mean, and then with your author platform thing, it's set up right for Christmas time, which is a time when everybody kind of slows down with their writing and kind of does a little bit more selling. And so again, I'm sure that was by design as well, a little bit.
Don't usually talk about it. If somebody brings it up, we can definitely go into it, but it's not something that is standard, because the connection system is more all encompassing. These are things that you need to be doing all the time on a regular basis. These are things that you need to have set up. And then I don't talk a lot about paid promotions in the class, because this is all based on organic. However, if somebody wants to, maybe I'll add that. Maybe I'll have a week on ads. Because ads are just, and paid promotion is just another form of outreach.
Yeah.
And I strongly recommend that everybody build a platform and organic reach and have sales coming in before you start spending money on ads.
Yeah.
Because
it's really an extension of what you're doing, not the solution, right?
right. Yeah. And a lot of people only do ads. Like when I see people who are like, I made $10,000 this month. And it's like, how much did you spend on ads? $7,000.
Right.
Like,
yeah, the math doesn't add up.
that's $3,000, but when I launch my next book, I'm working to get to $2,000 organically before I ever spend any money on ads.
Yeah.
That's my goal, because I want to do something that, like with blueprinting and the way that I'm writing, I want it to be sustainable long term.
Mm.
And I can't always spend $7,000 on ads.
Right, sure. That would be a nice luxury. Yeah. Everything. You still have openings, I would assume.
Yeah, I have the next class I haven't even started filling yet, so you can go ahead and apply for that. It's in August. You can go and sign up and apply. I do it as an application because I can only take 10 people, and I want to make sure I get people who are going to stick with it and know what they're. However, if you're a newbie and you're not sure, if you're not sure that this is the right fit for you, sign up for a call on my website and we can talk about it.
How has being a coach and doing these things helped your writing?
Well, I get exposed to different kinds of stories that I wouldn't necessarily be exposed to in other ways, because my reading background is all I really like romance. That's what I like to read. I'm one of those people. So, helping V, there is a romance plot in most of her stuff, but it's very like subplot, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not. But so even just working with her, I saw stories that I wouldn't necessarily have picked up on my own that I love. Nell Bentley is like my favorite. Like I love her.
Becoming mine as well. I really enjoyed Strangers.
You need to be reading.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot from story, but if you're writing a book, you need to be reading books in that genre, at least like 5. We call them masterworks. So like bestsellers, books that have lasted throughout the years. Like if you're writing romance, you should have read Pride and Prejudice, because Jane Austen knew what she was doing. And there's a lot you can learn from that, but you can also learn story from film. Like I don't want people to think that they shouldn't be watching TV, because honestly, what I do is I buy 5 books in the genre that I want to write, and then I find like 5 or 6 movies in the genre, and I take them all in, because sometimes I can sit down and watch a movie in a night and learn something from that, and it takes me days to read a book. So definitely be reading, but don't feel bad for watching movies either.
Reading, though, doesn't reading in its own sense kind of give you an idea of how to pace too, and how to what conventions there are out there, because you don't see that in a movie. You enjoy a movie, you ingest a movie, so the story elements are what really you can gather from that. But really, if you're writing a book, the idea, the craft of it is what you see, right? And so wouldn't that help in terms of that's why people say all authors should be reading, because
yes,
you get a sense of pace, you get a sense of style, you get a sense of if you're in a specific genre, how to hit those marks in that genre.
Yes, and you can get a lot of that from a film, but books are going to show you, especially the masterworks, are going to show you what readers expect, and in the way that they expect it. Like if you want to do something unique with style, you need to take into account the books that have already been written. Conventions and obligatory scenes are totally in film. If you know what to look for, you can see them. If you don't know what to look for, you need to be reading the book, because you're digesting it slower and it's a little bit different experience. And it might be easier. I think it's easier for people to pick out.